Analyst Juan Williams and Fox News contributor Steve Hayes of the Weekly Standard. Steve, pretty amazing to see the turnaround of statements from this is a time-sensitive issue that needs to happen, the impassioned push from Secretary of State Kerry yesterday, the belief that this was going to happen in hours, and now this, a call for congressional authorization, something that many House and Senate members on both sides of the aisle were calling for.
Right. I mean, this is an absolutely extraordinary development. The president and his team have been effectively making the case for war and making the case on an urgent basis that the United States needed to react in response to this chemical weapons attack on August 21st. Now the president apparently has had some change of heart, is deciding to go to Congress to seek approval. I think the key question now is, will this president make the case that we should strike Syria? We've seen in the past, whether we're talking about Afghanistan, whether we're talking about the NSA program, this president has been reluctant to engage members of Congress and the American public in a consistent, continuing dialogue on issues of national security. He campaigned in 2012 as someone who wanted to run to do some nation building back at home. He hasn't wanted to focus on these prickly problems overseas. And in order to win this vote in Congress, he's going to have to make a case. It'll have to be a sustained case. And I'm very skeptical that he'll be able to win on that vote.
Just out in reaction to the president's announcement, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell with a statement, quote, "Today the president advised me that he will seek an authorization for the use of force from the Congress prior to initiating any combat operations against Syria in response to the use of chemical weapons. The president's role as commander-in-chief is always strengthened when he enjoys the express support of Congress." That's the first statement from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Juan, your thoughts about what we just heard?
I think the pressure from not only the American people in terms of poll numbers that express great concern about going into Syria, no matter if it's a limited intervention and of limited duration, has carried the day here. And I think you've heard this expressed from members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, and the people who have used the president's own words against him. Previously, he said that a president should go to Congress and have some authorization. This is a moment, I think, when you can see that we are a democracy. The power of the people here has prevailed. The American people are not convinced that we are going to have a good impact, and not convinced that we have reviewed all the possible repercussions of this action. In fact, you hear more and more talk that it could, in fact, worsen the situation for the very reasons that we had not intervened previously, which is giving aid to al-Qaeda and their prominent role among the rebels inside of Syria. But here is the president, I think, responding not only, as I said, to the American people and public opinion in the Congress, but to Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. According to what the president just said, Dempsey indicated to him that an attack on Syria by the United States is going to be effected today, tomorrow, or next week. And therefore, the time doesn't matter. And I think that then opened the door to allowing him to wait on the September 9th discussion or debate inside the Congress.
Chris, what president looks at the vote in the British Parliament, a vote where this was shot down, and Prime Minister David Cameron made an impassioned plea for action, and the Parliament voted no? What president then says, I'd like to do that? He said he was elected to make hard decisions, but in this case, and there have been calls from senators and House members to do just this, but in this case, he is passing this to Congress to make this vote before he makes a hard decision, after the British Parliament just voted down Prime Minister Cameron.
Let me pick up on the tone of your question. I am astonished by what the president has decided to do today. In his statement, he said, "While I believe that I have the authority to launch this attack, I believe the country will be stronger. The issue is too big for business as usual." One can certainly argue the case, and there are plenty of people, as Juan said, who believe, both in Congress and out, that he should get congressional authorization. But there's a long history from Ronald Reagan to Bill Clinton, a long history of Jerry Ford with the Maya Gaz, where presidents have taken it upon themselves as the commander-in-chief, especially when it's a limited action. And this was certainly going to be a limited action. We were talking whether it was 48 hours or 96 hours to take that action, that authority upon himself and to go ahead. Now we're talking about, and the president said, I'm looking forward to this debate as if it's going to be another campaign. And he's going to, I disagree with Steve. I think he will make the case for it affirmatively and make the argument. But we're now talking, as you say, about 10, 12 days, whatever it is, until September 9th before Congress comes back. And then they have the debate and then they vote. This is going to take us into mid-September, in addition to which, of course, we're going to face a budget crisis while all that is going on. And let's just suppose for a minute that we end up like the British Parliament, to take your question, and Congress ends up voting it down. We've just had John Kerry yesterday say it's not just Syria. The whole world is watching. Iran is watching. Hezbollah is watching. North Korea is watching to see how our country will respond to the use of unconventional weapons of mass destruction by these regimes. If they vote it down, and you can't imagine that if he takes it to Congress for a vote and they vote no, that he's going to go ahead and do it anyway, then what message have we sent to the world then? I am astonished by the decision to do this. And the only thing, there's talk about polls. The polls must have really been bad for the president to decide, well, I got to go to Congress. It's a good political decision. I'm not so sure it's such a good decision for the commander-in-chief.
Joining us now also to weigh in, syndicated columnist, Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer. Charles, we've talked this week on the special report panel about this reluctant president, really in every statement that he made, this sense of reluctance to get involved, number one, and number two, the outlay of how limited it was going to be. And now this announcement that he is going to pause, essentially, and wait for this debate and vote in Congress on September 9th. They get back at 2 p.m. September 9th, House and Senate leaders and members.
Well, I think this is astonishing, the way that my colleagues have described it. But the most astonishing thing is the lack of any urgency. As you say, Congress will be back in a week. He says I can strike in a day or a week or a month, as if he's a judge handing down a sentence, and the execution can be any time in the future. There's a war going on. Do you think everybody's going to hold their breath, hold their arms, step aside until Obama decides when he wants to go to Congress? Look, I think he should go to Congress. I think it's absolutely necessary. But he's done no preparation. What they should have done, this is sort of amateur hour. When there were the first attacks 6 months ago, or if you like, when we had the current attack, he should have immediately have called in the Congress, the way that the Prime Minister of Britain had called in the Parliament, had a debate and got a resolution, and then went out and told the world, we're going to do X or we're not going to do X. But the idea that you make the case, you leak the details, you tell the world this has to be done, and then you say, well, I'll take my time, I'll go to Congress, and we'll see. This should be done in 3 days. It isn't as if people aren't aware of the arguments. He should go out there, bring them in, have it done by the end of the week, and the world, I think, will have a little higher respect. But this looks as if you're a cynic, meaning if you're sitting in Syria or in Iran or in Moscow, it looks like a president who boxed himself into a corner and is looking for a way out.
Standby panel, if you would. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry is at the White House. He's getting ready for a briefing. Ed, your thoughts on the president's speech and what the reaction is there after days and days of kind of this pre-leak about what was going to happen?
Brett, it is stunning because, as you know, and I and others have been pressing in the briefing room day after day about whether or not the president would go to Congress to get authorization, and we were repeatedly rebuffed and told he was just consulting Congress, these calls, these briefings, etc. You talk about pardon me the word reluctance. He has been a reluctant warrior throughout this debate. In fact, a Nobel Peace Prize winner who, as he spoke in the Rose Garden, you can hear them now probably, the protesters behind me on the north side of the White House gates, who are anti-war protesters shouting, stay out Obama, basically. And we were told he could hear those protesters in the Rose Garden. It was audible over there. Some important information to impart. The president does not return from the G20 summit in Russia until Friday, September 6th. You mentioned that following week, September 9th, both chambers of Congress are not scheduled to come back until the 9th. They could obviously move that up. But remember what else is happening in early to mid-September. You've got a debate about the debt ceiling that's going to be met soon. You've got the government shutdown that's looming at the end of September. You've got the immigration reform bill the president's been pushing. All of that's going to have to be pushed to the side. He has now made this issue number one to be dealt with. He will get credit on